Scientism Exposed.
Exposed. So this is basically going to be my commentary on a film by Robbie Davidson, who happens to be a big name in the flat earth community. And though this film is based on the title about scientism, which is a concept that I tend to actually support and agree with, the film is actually going to use that as a basis for leading people down the path of, questioning the shape of the earth and providing flat earth arguments. So this is kind of going to be my response to this, point by point. I haven't actually watched the entire film yet. I did watch about the first quarter of it. So you might ask, why are you responding to flat earth videos and arguments? Well, first, I'd like to say that I both do and don't want to do this at the same time. If I'm up front, I'm coming from a anti-flat earth perspective, but I am willing to be proven wrong if this video provides solid evidence and points that will support a flat earth model. I would be very interested. So this film, I feel like, since it is so well produced as a film, and Robbie Davidson is such a large name in the flat earth community, if this is a thing, Robbie Davidson should have a well-reasoned explanation for the flat earth. And I have high expectations for this film, even though I don't expect to be convinced by it. I am interested in what will be presented, and I'd like to respond to it as I watch the film. I have to admit, as I was looking into flat earth, there were certain arguments that seemed to be convincing. They were somewhat compelling, they were interesting, and they kind of sucked you in. So I'm not coming at this as someone who just thinks it's a joke, there's nothing to it. There are pieces and elements within it that are true and compelling. It's just not cohesive and compelling as a whole. And so I feel like I might be better equipped than some to reach out to flat earthers and cause them to question what they've been told by certain individuals. Part of me says there's no reason to respond to flat earth because there's enough information out there that if someone was really wanting to find the truth and really willing to be wrong, that they would find that the earth is round. There's enough information out there. But part of me says this is a dangerous disinformation campaign that is undermining, unfortunately, the presentation of the gospel, because many times it is Christians that are falling into this movement. And unfortunately, I believe it does discredit everything that they have to say. So all that said, I am going to try to come at this with an open mind. I am willing to be proven wrong, but I don't expect to be. So with that, let's get right into it. So for the sake of time, I'm going to be fast forwarding anything that is irrelevant to the argument at hand or is redundant and not necessary for proving the idea of either scientism or flat earth. Like I said, I am coming at this mainly as a video about flat earth, so some of the important points about the idea of scientism I am also going to fast forward.
It might come to a surprise to most people that one of the most dangerous worldviews one can hold is scientism. The failing of science is not really about the scientific method. It is about a largely unrecognized epistemology that developed as a result of the successes of science. This faulty epistemology can be called scientism, and we should make a sharp distinction between science and scientism. Science is a method of inquiry and the knowledge acquired by that method. The scientific method involves hypothesizing, experimenting, observing, and drawing conclusions.
So let me stop here and say that I agree with him up until this point. people have a sort of religious view about science and tend to fully believe anyone that is touted as an expert in their field. There are big problems with that. Scientists can be wrong and are wrong a lot. New studies come out all the time that prove old theories wrong, as this film goes on to mention. Scientists can also be corrupt and led only by a potential profit, or they may do anything to seek funding or a name for themselves. But not only that, people lose something of their own integrity when they say something that they don't know to be true, rather than admit that they don't know by saying things like, "as far as I know," or "according to experts." Ideas are spouted as facts when little is actually understood about the method at arriving at those ideas. But when we understand science and how the world works, we are better equipped to critically examine information and use our intuition and understanding to decide for ourselves if what is being said is true. Unfortunately, the same applies in the reverse. Thinking goes, those who claim to be experts on something and devote their lives to a subject can't be wrong, right? The same trust in authorities that makes people believe mainstream ideas also helps give credence to nonsense spouted on YouTube and other social media. After all, those people appear to be experts that say they are helping the blind masses come to the light. And maybe you are one of those blind fools too, and they should listen to them. So a few persuasive videos later and you're in a rabbit hole, slipping into, well, you be the judge.
When looking for truth, we should always look for the simplest explanation possible. And when it comes to biblical interpretation, if the plain sense makes sense, seek no other sense. As humanity emerged from the Middle Ages, a battle began to rage between the fathers of the church and the new intellectuals of the Enlightenment. That struggle continues today, even though it had seemed for a time that the debate was over and that the science was settled.
So this is true. The plain, literal sense of a Bible passage is the one we should go with, if it's clear that God is providing a historical, factual account. But we also have to understand that much of the Bible is figurative. God and his people use figurative language to make and emphasize points. And I'm not just talking about parables. The argument a flat earther will make is to say, how do you know if it is being literal or figurative? Well, the answer is careful examination of the text and whether what's being said aligns with the reality that we are able to perceive. That is, if the concept is physical, it should match what our physical eyes see. God is not a deceiver. He wouldn't make the world appear to be round when it is in fact flat, just as he wouldn't plant dinosaur bones in the ground just to make people doubt Genesis. Otherwise, he would be a deceiver and not the God who cannot lie.
The issue is that science is no longer science. True science is simply the scientific method or empirical data. What is commonly called science these days is actually just the religion of the world, full of fabrication and an anti-God agenda.
So these three ideas are foundational to flat earth theory, and the rest of the video, I believe, will build upon them. First, the idea that we should question mainstream views in scientists. Second, the secular scientific world is anti-God, pro-evolution, and the round earth model forms a basis for those anti-God theories. And third, biblical hyperliteralism. So as a note here, I am coming at this as a Torah-keeping Christian that believes in a literal 6-day creation. I am fast-forwarding here as this portion simply reinforces those foundational arguments, primarily the last one.
Scientism has its roots in the Big Bang cosmology and evolutionary thought. If humans have evolved by a material, purposeless process, then there is no basis for believing in a God who created us and revealed moral truths or imposing those moral views in any area of life. In 1922, G.K. Chesterton warned that scientism had become a creed taking over our institutions, a system of thought which began with evolution and has ended in eugenics. But I believe that it began much earlier with the heliocentric universe, our solar system, Big Bang cosmology, giving us the perfect storyline to introduce biological evolution at a later date.
So this segment is talking about evolution, and they're going to make the case that evolution is only possible if the world is round, and therefore that idea is the foundation for an atheistic, materialistic worldview planted by Satan long before Darwin was born. Association fallacy. An association fallacy is an informal, inductive fallacy of the hasty generalization or red herring type, which asserts by irrelevant association and often by appeal to emotion that qualities of one thing are inherently qualities of another. That is, evolution and the globe model. The creator of this video knows that most Bible-believing Christians hate evolution. It is therefore the aim of this section to closely link the globe Earth model with evolution. However, the error here is that the same argument could be made for our understanding of chemistry, biology and adaptation, physics, or any other scientific concept. All of these uncontested realities are prerequisites for a godless, materialistic worldview, as they provide a modicum of explanation for the world around us that goes beyond the simple fact that God made it so. Disproving evolution has nothing to do with proving the shape of the Earth. The evolution and globe-Earth connection is therefore a red herring, though it forms a crux of their argument and is key to getting you to feel as though you are on the side of the film's creator.
Because as Christians, we want to focus on the truth. We want to focus on God, face Him, and just ignore all the distractions. But while we're facing God and we're observing that, we also need to be aware of what the distractions are so that we can help others understand. And so we want to expose the lies for what they are.
And as far as I can tell, unfortunately, in most cases, science has never been right. They've got theories, and they've got an agenda. That's the problem. The agenda is to take God out of everything.
In most cases, science has never been right. I would say in most cases it is right. It's only wrong where it's based on assumptions, conjecture, and hypothetical models, such as the origin of the universe, evolution, climate predictions, etc. Most scientific information is reliable, otherwise it would be easily proven incorrect.
It seems that whenever the Bible and science seem to clash, the Bible takes the backseat. The Bible is misinterpreted. The Bible is changed. The Bible is the one who has to bow to science, and this should not be the case. Science should align with the Bible. Science should not malign the Bible.
That is correct. However, does our understanding of the world around us align with reality or a false notion about what the Bible is trying to convey? All things must be tested. The Word of God will always be true, but our understanding and interpretation may not be.
According to scientism, if something is not rational or not verifiable through the physical senses, then it is not real. We see then that scientism blinds us to everything in reality that is beyond the scope of the scientific method, no matter what the method may reveal to us. When you study when it comes to Big Bang cosmology, when it comes to the whole creation of the universe, understand that without the Big Bang, there is no evolution. Without the Big Bang heliocentric, universe, when it came to gravity, that everything, has to orbit around the sun, and gravity is what makes, everything exist. Understand that without that entire narrative, there is no evolution.
Scientism and the universe.
But at the dawn of history, people thought they knew the answers to these profound questions.
The ancients viewed their world as a snow globe. It was essentially a flat earth, say a disk, covered by a dome. And we call this in English a firmament. And in the firmament is where all the stars and the planets were hung.
Almost all ancient cultures believed their universe existed in a dome similar to this one.
And it's interesting, because when you do the research, you quickly start to see that humanity's sinful desire to rid themselves of an all-powerful creator had been fed this lie of evolution and the Big Bang narrative from the enemy himself. And that these concepts of vast ages of the earth and the gradual progression of life forms were not first proposed by the likes of Darwin, but they actually go quite far back and are found in the teachings of many mystic traditions such as Kabbalism and Greek and Babylonian mystery schools.
Scientism and the occult.
We start off with Pythagoras, and is where we get the Pythagorean theorem, and that basically comes down to understand even the curvature of the earth. We use the Pythagorean theorem, 8 inches per mile squared. And again, the Pythagorean theorem is very, very important because it basically started off a lot of the scientific thought right down through Copernicus and Darwin, and many of them got their thoughts through Pythagoras.
In his pursuit of wisdom, Pythagoras traveled broadly, searching for lost occult knowledge. He found it in the mystery schools scattered throughout many different cultures.
We can't say he originated anything, but he condensed and boiled down the knowledge of the world and then brought it to a practical application.
Pythagoras turned the numbering system of the Babylonians into a sacred science.
They believed that number was like God, and to connect with this was to be talking to God. And so from that arises a whole lot of symbolism that later becomes numerology, Kabbalah, things like that.
So the long and the short of it is that the Pythagorean mysticism, fetching disguised as something scientific, reduced practically everything to mathematical numbers.
So let me jump back to something that Robbie had said earlier. Let's take a listen.
Understand that without the Big Bang, there is no evolution. Without the Big Bang, heliocentric, universe, understand that without that entire narrative, there is no evolution.
So you see what Robbie is saying here. Evolution is dependent on the heliocentric model, that is, the sun being in the center of the solar system. But that's not 100% true. Supposing that everyone in the ancient world believed that the world was flat with a dome over it, which, ironically, they have only appealed to secular history for validation for so far, they still had hundreds of different religions and creation myths. This video itself said Pythagoras adopted the idea of a very old Earth from pagan mystery schools. It would be a short step for man and the devil to go from pagan gods to no god. Evolution and alien seeding could have been conceived quite easily within a flat Earth framework. The globe model just happens to be where science has taken us, and I believe that science is good, but more on that when we get to the models.
Scientism in the heavens.
Pictures of medieval cosmology, then you see not only the Earth and the planets, but the outer sphere. Beyond that, you would have heaven. So that the Earth was considered to be at rest, ultimately, with respect to heaven, with respect to the throne of God.
Copernicus conceived what turned out to be the foundational idea of modernity itself, the idea that the Earth moved.
Virtually all people everywhere have been taught to believe, and do believe, that this concept is based on objective science and dispassionate secular reasoning, now long since freed from religious superstitions based on the Bible. Indeed, it was the Copernican heliocentric concept that gradually broke the back of Bible credibility as the source of absolute truth in Christendom. It was only a matter of time until the biological sciences launched the Darwinian Revolution. Over 3 centuries of carefully layered propaganda and indoctrination had defeated and all but buried the Bible's account of a stationary Earth.
This portion of the video gives an account of how Copernicus, Tycho, and Kepler's theories about the universe came to shape our current understanding and what they based their studies on, particularly Kepler and his use of a concept called the Book of Nature.
Now, there was a German publication from the 14th century entitled Book of Nature, but that's not what we're referring to. The Book of Nature actually isn't really a book at all, but it's more of a concept that originated sometime during the Middle Ages, stemming from the Greek philosophers and their naturalistic and humanistic concepts. From its conception, it was nothing more than the wisdom of the world, or man's wisdom.
So let's follow the reasoning here. Because Kepler's scientific endeavors were based on humanistic ideas, we should throw out his discoveries. If Kepler was not a Christian, Tesla certainly wasn't. Yet his discoveries with alternating current make it possible to view the very video that you're watching. Most scientific discoveries that we have come to know to be true do not come from Bible-believing Christians, yet that doesn't make the knowledge that they pass on invalid. Rather, it causes Christians, such as ourselves, to wonder at the elegance and complexity of the world around us and give glory to God.
Space and Scientism.
He was considered basically the greatest rocket scientist of all time. He basically founded NASA. He created NASA. Yet, he's got very sinister, satanic, occult links with Aleister Crowley. You get into the Apollo missions in the 60s, they supposedly went 240,000 miles away to the moon. And yet since then, 2016, 2017, the furthest that man has been in space is 400 miles. 400 miles. I don't know if you heard that correctly, 400 miles. They said in the 60s they went 240,000 miles. Again, there's something going on here. Specifically talks about how the sun, the moon, and the stars were created on the fourth day. The earth was already created. What was the earth orbiting around before the sun was even created? See, understand that scientism, no matter how much you want to cling to science, you're going to have a hard time if you're going to look at the literal meaning of Genesis or of creation.
On numerous occasions, NASA admits that we can't go beyond low Earth orbit, which is between 99 miles and 1,200 miles away. The interesting thing is that the moon is said to be 238,000 miles away, which is a difference of 236,800 miles.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
Now, let me get this straight. NASA wanted us to believe in a heliocentric solar system. So, according to NASA, they landed on the moon in 1969, which we know they couldn't have done because of the Van Allen radiation belt, according to NASA. And since the Van Allen radiation belt is dependent upon a heliocentric universe, it doesn't actually exist, according to you. So NASA invented a reason that they couldn't have flown to the moon. Makes perfect sense.
But if in our research we understand that NASA has lied, modern day science has lied, the global elite have lied, they've led us to believe in these lies.
We look out in the universe and 85% of all the gravity that's out there has some mysterious unknown source. We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe.
And dark matter is a great example. The whole idea of dark matter came from the idea that galaxies spin too fast. They spin so quickly that the observable matter, which is based on light, the light that we can see from the galaxies, that there isn't enough mass there, that they're spinning so fast that they should fly apart based on the conservation of angular momentum. So we've made this assumption that there's more mass there that we can't see, and that's what dark matter is. That's where it comes from. It defies the basic laws of physics here on Earth. And so besides the idea that that might not even be true, that those things might not be that far away, we're forcing things in the night sky to have to comply with our physics here on Earth. Now that in itself is an enormous assumption.
We're told that the sun is 93 million miles away from the Earth.
Here we go. This is it, I hope.
We're also told the sun and the moon appear to be the same size in the sky. The explanation is that the diameter of the sun is almost 400 times the size of the diameter of the moon. The distance of the moon to the sun is 400 times greater. Therefore, this is coincidence. There is never coincidence, and this is what we want to investigate.
According to a recent study conducted by the National Science Foundation, 1 in 4 Americans believes that the sun and everything else in space revolves around the Earth, and not, as modern science says, the other way around.
I highly doubt those statistics are true, but okay.
Believing in what's called geocentrism is really pretty stupid right now, given that Galileo, Copernicus, and Kepler debunked it over 500 years ago.
We are told that the Earth spins at 1,040 miles per hour, while the Earth travels around the Sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Meanwhile, the whole solar system is going inside the Milky Way galaxy at a speed of 490,000 miles per hour. And finally, the entire Milky Way galaxy is darting through infinite space at over 1 million miles per hour. Most people believe this, and yet every experiment ever conducted to prove even the simple spin of the Earth has failed.
So that is somewhat true to my knowledge, but there are a couple of things to note when stating something so crudely. The stars rotate from our perspective. So we know that there is spin. Either the Earth is spinning within the universe, or the heavens are spinning over the Earth, as the flat earthers propose. Now, there is plenty of evidence to support the idea that it is the Earth that is spinning within space, but I don't know of any study that could even attempt to prove the rotation of the Earth that could be conducted from the Earth. There's not really a way to prove motion without doing it in respect to another object. Imagine it this way. You're in a moving car driving at a constant speed. Do you feel the movement of the car? Now, I'm not talking about the bumps, but the speed of the car. Well, no, you don't, because you're moving at the same speed as the car. You only feel it if it accelerates or decelerates. Now imagine you lived on a blimp floating through the air and it was moving at a constant 30 miles an hour, and just kind of ignore wind and turbulence and that kind of thing for a moment. Now imagine someone told you that it was not the blimp moving, but that the blimp was still and the Earth was moving underneath you. How would you prove otherwise? The only way to do so would be to come up with theories that create a framework for describing how objects move in relation to each other. There's no test that you can do to prove whether the blimp is moving over the Earth or whether the Earth is moving under the blimp. Now, strictly speaking, in regards to motion, the incredible thing is that there is actually no difference between the Earth spinning in the universe and the universe spinning around the Earth.
Science is supposed to be point A, B, C, and D. You come up with a hypothesis. You then come up with a way to test that hypothesis, and hopefully it's a repeatable method that you can get the same results. And you can then verify if your hypothesis is true or false. And science has actually done this with several different things. Airy's failure, Sagnac, Michelson-Morley, Michelson-Gale experiments, many different things, and even today, gyroscopes. They all show through the scientific method that the Earth does not move. It absolutely does not move. It is ether, what they call the ether, and the stars, everything around us, which is moving around us. We are stationary. Everything we see in the sky revolves around the Earth.
In 1887, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley conducted what's known as the Michelson-Morley experiment. This experiment was attempting to prove the speculated motion of the Earth around the Sun, and when it failed, Albert Einstein was forced to form the theory of relativity to overcome this problem. In fact, anytime mainstream science is faced with undesirable results, they create a workaround, which isn't real science at all.
This experiment was not designed to prove or disprove a heliocentric model. Up until that point, scientists believed in the ether, which is a kind of invisible medium that light was assumed to be required to travel through. The experiment simply disproves this hypothetical concept that scientists themselves had postulated. Instead of proving the ether, it showed that light moves at a constant speed regardless of the motion of the light source. Also, Einstein was not forced to come up with the theory of general relativity in response to this failed experiment. In fact, he claims to not even have known about the experiment. However, a man named Lorentz did hypothesize in response to Morley's calculations. The interesting thing is that Einstein and Lorentz arrived at the same mathematical conclusions, though Lorentz was actually trying to prove the existence of the ether. I will include links in the description to some excellent videos describing this and hopefully other experiments that are mentioned here.
Scientism and the future.
What if everything you've been taught is a lie? What if there is an agenda? What if scientism is moving us, not only teaching us our past with evolution, with dinosaurs, but also showing us our future? Basically becoming gods themselves. I think this is the whole idea that Satan has spawned with men, is to become like God. Just these superhuman abilities to become like gods, to become supermen. I think this has been the quest of scientism for a very long time while deceiving the world.
This portion of the video describes the aim of science in a sort of technological evolution.
Consider the statement, quote, "We should only believe what can be scientifically proven," end quote. Can that statement be scientifically proven? Well, obviously not. And thus the scientific naturalist's position refutes itself, and so it cannot be true.
An excellent point from William Lane Craig.
And again, systematically, they have to create this entire paradigm without God. They have to create an entire reality that is anti-Christian, that is anti-biblical, and it is very deceptive and dangerous. Hopefully we can do a lot to expose it, get people searching for the truth, exposing the lies of scientism. Has it been a plan all along to discredit that you are special, you are loved, you're uniquely made in the image of an all-loving, all-powerful God?
Yes, it is. But how much of it has to be false and how much of it can be true for that to still be the case?
Scientism and sin.
So they offer a sort of gospel presentation here, which I appreciate, but as you can see, they try to tie it to the flat earth theory.
Jesus as the central figure of the Bible in both the Old and New Testament stands alone. As the pivotal piece of the biblical message, which proclaims first a finite, fixed, immovable earth, and then us, fallen humanity, finite, enclosed, imprisoned in our own sin. Only Jesus provides a way of escape, a way out. There's an irony in the comparison in both the enclosed biblical cosmology and Big Bang Copernican cosmology, in the sense that both paradigms one can set out to study and understand everything in the cosmos, from the Earth to the Sun to the Moon and stars, and yet never take the time to intently study the reality of their own heart.
Since they only referred to the Bible as a basis for belief in Flat Earth without actually directly talking about the scriptures, I'm going to take a moment here to briefly address that argument. Yes, there are passages describing the earth as being on a foundation or having pillars, not moving, and a firmament being above the earth, but there's no exact explanation of the shape and structure of the earth. After all, it also says that the earth hangs on nothing, which sounds like it's floating in space. It describes God as sitting above the circle of the earth, but the earth is always a circle from our perspective, and he isn't necessarily referring to the shape of the entire earth. The flat earth model is round, but the Bible mentions 4 corners or extremities of the earth. So where are those in that model? I'm sad that they left out what the flat earth model actually is, because, well, for one, it doesn't have a sun that rises and sets as the Bible describes, and there is much that could be said, but I'll leave that for another video. The purpose of this video is to cause people to question the aim and conclusions of the scientific community. While in some respects, it is worthwhile. It is unquestionable that scientism, as they call it, is a huge part of the zeitgeist. Scientists and their backers, by and large, are coming from a godless, atheistic, humanistic perspective. But does that mean we should question all findings and discoveries of science? Did this film actually present compelling counterarguments for major scientific theories? Not really. It seems to have been the goal rather to simply discuss the theories and cause the viewer to have an emotional response against them, presumably so that they will decide to investigate further and that they would eventually come to the conclusion that the Earth is flat. The arguments were not primarily designed to debunk evolution or our understanding of cosmology, but to simply state that those theories and the ones supporting them are unbiblical. I guess I had higher expectations for this film, which is disappointing because I felt they were pretty low to start with. The film is about the idea of scientism, not specifically flat Earth. But it seems to be attempting to appeal only to those that already question scientific consensus. Or, in other words, it's just propaganda. It's designed as a sort of rallying self-approval for those that already believe in a flat Earth and already question evolution. And again, I question evolution. So I'd like to respond to specific flat Earth arguments, and I found a series called Clues by a man named Mark Sargent, who apparently is kind of the father of the new flat Earth movement. So please watch out for those videos if you are interested in this further. And if Robbie or anyone out there watches this video and has a response to anything that I've said, please feel free to leave a comment or leave a response video. I'd be happy to watch it. Thanks.
Because as Christians, we want to focus on the truth. We want to focus on God, face Him, and just ignore all the distractions. But while we're facing God and we're observing that, we also need to be aware of what the distractions are so that we can help others understand. And so we want to expose the lies for what they are.